publication that is publicly available. It's just downloading on the World Bank site. And it shows different buckets in which policymakers can act in order to foster green finance, in order to foster, in fact, a more sustainable financial sector. So the first thing is understanding this value chain, understanding the supply-demand green finance framework. And we have different players. We have international organizations in one point, we have the government in the other, we have the private sector, and it's the role of each player to try to connect those dots and fill the gaps between them. So how to connect the dots between international organizations and the government? That's the first challenge. It's a key challenge. So it's important for the country to understand investment needs. It's important for the country to have information, to collect data, and try to devise a plan, a strategic plan, which is viable, which is consistent, which is accurate. So it's going to be easier to connect the dots to the international organizations, to the international financial community, and also to connect the dots with the private sector. And the private sector, I mean financial institutions, non-financial institutions, households, the academy, you name it, the whole economy. And to connect the dots with the private sector, it's important to establish a process in which you exchange, in which you develop capacity, in which you set a dialogue with the private sector in order to make it happen. And this is a big gap in most emerging markets, is to fill the gaps between the government and the private sector. Most of the funding that we see at international level is still comprised by public money, public resources. We should leverage private sector capital in order to blend finance and make it less costly and make more attractive for the private sector to get into. When it comes to government, it's also important to promote this enabling environment so the private sector can connect the dots directly with international organizations as well, like the IFC is doing. IFC is promoting loans with banks directly to finance SMEs portfolios here in Nepal. And that's very important because it's not only a green finance movement, it also has impacts on the social and on the broad concept of sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Reporto.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to, just to keep time, maybe you can come back to some of that
Sure.
in the second round. And actually quite important to look, as he was mentioning, at really the characteristics of the country. Nepal has a lot of renewable, it doesn't need as much mitigation finance, although there is irony in the fact that if you look at Kathmandu, where 70%, which is in a valley, which does need, some of that kind of financing for e-mobility and other things to make that transition. And interestingly, also for China, one of the main motivations of going towards e-mobility was really to cut back on pollution. Subsequently, they became a world leader in terms of the new energy and EVs and other vehicles, but the original motivation was really cutting back on pollution. So, really a mix of financing needed. Let's turn now to Mr. Jason Ving to get your perspective, as a Chief Sustainability Officer from Standard Chartered Bank. So as the lead for sustainability partnerships, working out of Singapore, how do you perceive the current landscape of green finance in emerging markets like Nepal? And what opportunities do you see for sustainable investments, from the perspective of a financial institution?
Thank you very much. So there's always that nervous moment. Can you all hear me? Yeah, great, thank you. Honourable Vice Chairman, Honourable Secretary, distinguished guests and panelists. On behalf of Standard Chartered, thank you all thank you for the government and the organisers for giving us this platform to share the private sector finance perspective. over the last day and a half, we've heard a great number of perspectives, the opportunities and, of course, the numerous challenges that we're all trying to work with the government to solve. I'll keep my comments fairly kind of narrow and focused to our perspective as an international bank, both present here in Nepal, but of course a footprint with access to some of the capital that Rodrigo mentioned, that's keen to access the opportunities here in Nepal, but we need to help demystify it. So why are we talking about harnessing green investment? This is not new capital necessarily. This is not a silver bullet to the economic needs of Nepal. It comes from the climate, the real climate impact that we see globally, and we've already heard people mention the specific challenges or impact in Nepal. The second side is the supply of this capital. The regulatory environment is evolving, and the investors, the next generation, are starting to insist that their capital goes to ESG related to investments. So the die and the direction is already set. So it's about scalability. It's about providing the platform, the policy framework, the understanding of the needs for these private investors, for private commercial banks. It's a very small market here in Nepal. So to catalyze, we need to provide that platform, the regulatory understanding for these investors. So what do you need? You need a enabling policy and regulatory environment. You need strong institutions and a whole of government approach. You need access to capital. So that's not only the ability to bring capital in, it's the ability to manage that risk, both from an FX and interest rate capability, and very important is the ability to exit, right? So that two-way, that capital flow of cash and financing into and out of Nepal to create that financial ecosystem. The fourth one, and this is really important, is the quality of information and the capacity of the government and the institutions to be able to manage verifications, to manage third parties, to bring that confidence of investors into the country. So what is the prize? It's about unlocking not only the policy toolkit, but the financial toolkit. So Radhika, in your opening comments, the sovereign SDG bond of Indonesia, that is truly the flagship opportunity that sits in front of the government of Nepal. I think a number of us have heard about the need for a credit rating. I think I have to echo that. That does remove a lot of the friction in understanding the credit. Of course, the off-taker here is the government in itself. So that really is your benchmark for a number of investors. SDG bonds, the various formats of it, we have sustainability-linked loans that are being very popular within the Singapore ASEAN taxonomy that was mentioned. And not to scare anybody, but the next phase really is ESG derivatives. So the innovation is there, but we don't need to rush into it, right? We really are at the start of a very complex journey that a number of participants here are trying to solve for. So at the end of the day, it's about blending, it's about collaboration. The number of development finance institutions, official institutions here in Kathmandu is astounding. So the challenge is back to the private financial sector to try and bring that together, to try and bring consistency, and to understand how to catalyze and amplify that capital that's already here. So the final piece is education. So as a bank that both has a retail branch, an institutional and investment bank, and an international footprint, we do feel uniquely placed to bring some of that, those questions, the investor needs, back here into Kathmandu, as well as act as advocates for the journey here itself.
Thank you. Really important role in terms of also connecting to ESG investors, and we haven't even gotten into green deposits and other types of engagements there. But I think there's been also quite a lot of talk right through around the need to de-risk, and who better than the IFC to bring into that discussion. So now turning to, I hope I'm saying your name right, Ono Makopone. Okay, embarrassed about that. Yeah. So turning to you now to really tell us a little bit from the IFC perspective, really the potential for green finance, particularly in Nepal's infrastructure as part of this priorities, as part of this green transformation agenda.
I guess, first of all, thank you very much for having us. I think the very first question is, why green finance as opposed to any normal kind of project finance or corporate finance loan? And when you look at the infrastructure needs of Nepal, it's significant. I mean, research has said that Nepal will need about 10 to 12% of GDP to be invested annually for the next decade in order to actually reach its infrastructure goals. So the question is, how do you actually get there? So clearly it can't be all on the government purse. It has to be via private capital. And then when you look at private capital, you need to actually be able to afford the facility. So when we look at green finance, I mean, you said it very clearly in your presentation, green finance has the ability to actually support Nepal's transition to a sustainable economy. There are several sort of subsectors that could attract, specifically for Nepal, that could attract green finance. I mean, Nepal in itself is a green finance haven. Goes without saying, renewable energy. You mentioned EVs, so clean transportation, so not just for private vehicles, but also on the public side as well. Wastewater management, smart climate finance in the field of agricultural financing. Now, coming specifically to the IFC, how we look at, well, we usually call it climate funding investment. I'm going to call it that as opposed to green financing. So you basically have to fall into two broad buckets, right? Rodrigo mentioned climate mitigation and adaptation. So on the mitigation side, we're focused on projects that will that are along the decarbonization pathway. So specifically renewable energy, right? And there's a lot of investment on the hydro side, and we've actually invested alongside development partners in the Upper Tishuli hydro project. ISC alone actually put in almost $200 million in that project between debt and equity, mobilizing concessional funding as well to make sure that the project was bankable, right? And also, when we're looking at wastewater management as well, we're also focused on areas that will not do the environment any harm. Then on the climate adaptation and resilience bucket, our focus is on projects that will manage the physical climate change effectively. So we're talking about disaster systems, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in addition to the Upper Tishuli project, our focus has also been on how can we actually mobilize capital through financial institutions like Standard Chartered. So we provide a lot of funding through these institutions, whether it's by way of risk-sharing facilities or partial credit guarantees, not just in Nepal, but we have several examples of that in India, for instance, when we've done sustainability-linked bonds. So even in Sri Lanka, we're looking at green bond issuances through the financial institutions. So from an LIC perspective, we're not just interested in what can we put on our books, on our balance sheet. How can we actually facilitate private capital mobilization through the instruments that we offer?
Great. Thank you. Really comprehensive response. And last but not least, for the first round, turning to Mr. Ashish Garg, who's for the Energy Development Council, Confederation of Nepali Industries. Now, you've heard of all these different perspectives from the different parts of the ecosystem. From your perspective and, Nepali industry, in your opinion, what are some of the key policy reforms or regulatory measures needed to create this enabling environment for green finance and sustainable investment in Nepal's financial sector and, and other investments?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the only one from the private sector here on the panel. So
big
in
responsibility
Nepal,
on your shoulders.
Yeah. So green financing has as such not trickled down the Nepalese industry. The local banks are financing green projects. They are as such not doing green financing. They are financing green projects, meaning that the predominantly hydropower and solar which is picking up, banks are lending to these projects. There is no much difference between normal traditional lending and financing for green projects. So I would like to mention two major policy initiatives which have really worked. One is the central bank has introduced sectoral limits or requirement that say for green energy sector, 6.5% loan portfolio has to be allocated for that. Because of that, the banks have been forced to lend to hydropower projects or solar projects. And also, two banks floated green bonds. So that had very good response at very low interest rate. So because of this central bank policy, things worked. Second is, a product on rooftop for industries, rooftop solar, where, the UK aid, Nepal Renewable Energy Program, there was a grant and all the industries grabbed it, most of the industries, and that has helped to green the industries and replace to some extent coal or furnace oil or other fossil fuels. So these two initiatives have worked, but the journey is long. The issue remains, one is the green taxonomy. That has to come in very soon. We heard that by the end of this month, we will have that. So that will lay down the foundation of what is green and what is brown or black, and things will move. Second is the hedging. So when we get hedging for the currency risk, when we get international green funds, it comes in US dollar denominated. The currency is non-Nepalese, whereas we earn in Nepalese rupee. So who will foot the bill of this huge bill? Or, I would say there are no institutions as such providing hedging. So that is also on our government's table. Another major issue is the carbon credits or renewable energy certificates for taking up decarbonization or renewable energy project. We don't have a mechanism here. It's there in India, it's there in other countries. So I think the government has to take up that so that the private sector is incentivized to further green up their energy consumption or their activity. And not the least, the sovereign institutions in Nepal, like say HIDCL, the Hydro Investment Company, or banks like NIFRA, they should access international capital with their sovereign rating, because the private sector banks, Nepal is not rated, so private sector banks will have a hard time to get this capital in. So at the moment, the capital is not much, the green capital here in Nepal. We as private sector developers or industry, we have to borrow in the normal conditions. So a lot of expectations and a lot of, I would say, things to do.
Thank you very much. Lots of positive examples as well for what financial institutions are doing, but also indications of very concrete things that need to be done by the central bank and others to accelerate that progress. Now turning back to Secretary Marasini, in terms of what you've heard, and also the potential for public-private partnerships, which could help to make some of this much easier for the private sector in terms of the green economy agenda. How is the government facilitating such collaborations?
Well, thank you for this second round opportunity. And of course, if we see this summit itself is an example of government's priority to mobilize the public-private partnership in our economic development, and that too also in greening our economy. As Mr. Garg was just mentioning the central bank's policy, that there is a mandatory provision that the banks and bank and financial institutions in Nepal, they have to allocate certain amount of fund on the renewable energy side in hydropower production. So that these two stories already tell you that how seriously government of Nepal has been taking on the forging the PPP in our economy and also in greening our economy. Not only that, we have been also participating in the COP initiatives and recently in Doha as well. Though, Doha itself is a Gulf country, they are known for the, fossil fuels. But Nepal raised very strongly how much it has been affected because of the global climate change. We have pleaded for the green financing, international support, even from those type of those kind of fossil fuel producing and very rich countries, shifting their priority towards greening the economy and also to channeling the funds, towards the renewable energies or green sector. As much has been already discussed, and I have also mentioned to you that in my earlier answer, the government not only, focusing on or to some private sectors, but it has started demonstrating from its own policy. We have established the Investment Board of Nepal, and we do have this Public-Private Partnership and Investment Act already in place. So these are the institutional and legal frameworks that provide us, the way how we can force this PPP in Nepal. And also we have been supporting the bank and financial institutions through capacity building, through policy flexibilities, and also providing some tax incentives, and also offering financial incentives to encourage private sector participations in green projects. And also government is actively engaged in dialogue with the private sector to identify areas of collaborations and develop joint initiatives to promote green investment and sustainable development. We are also committed for SDGs by 2030. There also we have been allocating our funds and also putting priorities both to adaptation and mitigation. So these are some examples how government is promoting PPP in Nepal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So turning now to Mr. Pereira Porto from the World Bank on the same theme of collaborative approaches, innovative financing. Can you discuss the role of the bank in terms of innovative financing mechanisms and partnerships to scale up green economy projects in Nepal, particularly under the grid? And maybe this is a chance for those of us who don't know, very succinctly to tell us what's the grid and what's the innovative approach that the bank is taking to that.
Okay, thank you. Well, the grid is another strategic approach, and it means a green, resilient, and inclusive development. And here in Nepal, the government is working with more than a dozen partners, like development financial institutions, international community, with stakeholders here in Nepal, inside Nepal. And it's very ambitious in a way that it provides what here in Nepal you say like the 10 plus 10 plus 10, meaning that there is 10 transition plans, which encompasses, for example, transition toward adaptation of agricultural sector, sustainable cities and green housing, sustainable transportations, you name it, many different sort of transition plans. Nepal plans to use convening all these partnerships around $10 billion to be invested in the next 10 years. That's why they call it 10 plus 10 plus 10. So it's a very ambitious plan. The action plan is actually being discussed at this very moment with dozens of partners. And the World Bank Group, the World Bank, the IFC, and other institutions under the World Bank Group is collaborating on the discussions of the action plan of the grid, and is also preparing a particular plan in order to provide concessional finance, in order to provide innovative financial instrument, blending finance, technical sharing, capacity building, in order to promote innovative approaches to those transition plans, which is very important. So we must acknowledge that we need to have the focus, and we need to know exactly what to do in order to achieve those particular targets. And the design of innovative financial instruments, not only on the government, so it's on the private sector as well. And to make it happen, there are other things that should be considered alongside. And the World Bank Group is also working on with some public entities here in Nepal, for example, the Central Bank of Nepal. So we're working with them in three particular initiatives. First, identifying risks for the financial sector here in Nepal. And that's important because that could guide central bank on further actions in terms of regulatory framework, in terms of supervisory enhancement. So that's a very important point to mitigate market failures. So working on the risk perspective. On the data and information availability in Nepal, so it's important to work on disclosure, to work on reporting. The central bank is already working on the sustainable taxonomy, which is quite important not only for the regulator, but for financial institutions, for investors. There are many advantages of that because it lowers transaction costs, it facilitates monitoring flows, it facilitates designing new financial instruments like green bonds, like green loans. I think this is a very important momentum. And the World Bank Group is pretty aware of the need to understand investment needs and work with the financial authorities and the private sector in order to divide the best potential options under the grid, and of course, encompassing other actions under the nationally determined contributions, which there's a set of actions there that is going to be encompassed by the action plan under the grid.
Thank you. Now turning to Mr. Wing, so if you can be quite brief. In addition to the points you've already made, in terms of some of the key challenges that financial institutions face, any additional suggestions for how these can be addressed in the Nepal context, for example?
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's easy to be brief when I think a lot of the key topics have already been discussed and the challenges, so I won't recycle that. I think what is important is to highlight, as a private sector financial institution, one of our key accountabilities, of course, is our home regulator. So as a UK regulated bank, our needs and maybe our thresholds are very high. And that translates into our clients, that translates in the transactions we support, and also translates in our need to disclose. There's benefits, but also challenges that brings. So, to your question, of course, within some of our more developed markets, this is business as usual. Trying to bring such taxonomies, expectations into frontier markets is A, not easy, but B, nor should it be expected. So that's the journey that we're on. So as a bank, we do have our own net zero commitments, so that's a catalyst, as do many of our other counterparties that work with us in that financial ecosystem. The second piece is, jumping through, so how do we help as a firm, right, in collaboration with my colleagues here on the dais? It is that blended finance piece. It's easy to say, it's almost a cliche, but it comes down to people, it comes down to conversations, and it comes down to collaboration. We don't act as one. We all have our incentives, we all have our priorities, but we are being brought together by the need to address climate change. And I think if ever there was a mission to bring us together, that really is. And the Honourable Secretary really underlined what is very key is that policy continuity and confidence that allows investors to come in scale.
Thank you. And also a very important point about the taxonomy being comparable and interoperable to make it easier for institutions like yours and others really to see how these align. In terms of the IFC, any practical examples come to mind of how grant and concessional finance can be used to support underserved areas in particular? Because, we've heard also a lot about how, the green transition really needs to be inclusive. And the inclusivity theme is something we haven't really touched on a lot, but really has to go hand in hand with green. So any thoughts on that?
When we think about de-risking and, first of all, I think de-risking, the focus, first of all, has to be on the regulation in place that is actually creating an enabling environment. So we can't actually structure away regulation that is not inclusive and supportive of private sector investment. on the IFC side, when we look at concessional funding, and the concessional funding we use is usually blended finance, similar to what Jason has mentioned. And when we focus on blended finance and concessional funding, our immediate focus is not to crowd out private sector investment or commercial bank funding. Our focus is actually to crowd in commercial bank funding, collaborate. The whole idea behind our ethos is to make sure that we are mobilizing private capital. So we can't do it, and we won't do it all ourselves. In terms of blended finance, I mentioned before the Opportunity project. That was one of our largest blended finance instruments that we have used in Nepal and actually in the region. And the focus when we think about concessional financing is, first of all, what is the additionality that we as IFC are providing? Is this something that a Standard Chartered can do on their own? If Standard Chartered can provide the financing, then there really is no need for us, right? So we will come in primarily where there's a risk profile that commercial banks are not typically comfortable in funding. So that's really the basis of the additionality. Then secondly, is there a climate element? Does it support climate investment? Does it support climate mitigation and adaptation? And then thirdly, are we actually helping to build the market? So it shouldn't be a case of we are always here to provide the concessional funding. It should be a case of we do the first maybe 1 to 3 projects, and after that we've built significant resilience in the market, and it can now be carried out by commercial funding.
Very true. So I think really the importance of looking at also how do you get the transition towards economic sustainability over time, through these various types of de-risking and acceleration. Mr. Ashish Garg, the last word goes to you. What do you see as the role for industry associations such as CNI of really accelerating all these different initiatives, and what are some of the gaps from your side that you would like to highlight?
Thank you. So as I mentioned, currently there is not much gap between interest rate for a normal project and a green project in Nepal. Now the primary reason is, I think the currency risk and cost of it. So as in the industry association, we have been lobbying the voice of the industry to not only banks but DFIs and international funds. So say for example, how we have been working is, say for rooftop solar, the National Renewable Energy Program, they came up with this scheme of up to 1 megawatt of solar rooftop at concessional subsidized cost. So we went to our industry, maybe a cement factory or a steel factory, and we explained them that the benefit of this, and then the thing started moving in. There were practical issues while implementing this, which were communicated to the NREP program also. So we are basically a bridge. Once we understand, then we are able to explain to our industry and to the lending institution. So the journey, as I mentioned, we have just embarked on the journey. There is a long way to go. Say for infrastructure projects like hydro, we still have floating interest rate, short tenors, personal guarantee-based recourse project financing. So these are green projects, but we are still doing it in a traditional way. So a lot of policy initiatives have to be taken, and then it will be a real green in the real sense. And as industry will expect some incentive, though it is everyone's responsibility to be green. It's a matter of survival of mankind, but our industry would need some incentives, some concession to adopt these green practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that reality check, and really also all the mismatches you're dealing with, and how do we really get that kind of green responsive finance. Let me thank all the panelists and turn back to the MC.
Thank you very much to our moderator. And thank you to all our speakers and all our panelists as well for bringing forth your insights from your own experiences and from your field as well. May I now please request our session chair, Honorable Dr. Min Bahadur Shrestha, Vice Chair, National Planning Commission, for his closing remarks of this session.
Thank you. Ms. Radhika Lal, SDG Finance Policy Advisor, UNDP's Regional Hub, Thailand. Mr. Madhukumar Marasini, Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Government of Nepal. Mr. Rodrigo Pereira Porto, Senior Financial Sector Consultant, World Bank Group. Mr. Jason Wing, Sustainability Partnerships Lead, Chief Sustainability Office, Standard Chartered Bank. Ms. Idor Ono Makpome, Infrastructure International Finance Corporation. Mr. Ashish Garg from CNI, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste. As we bring this session of Nepal Investment Summit 2024 to a close, I want to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for your participation and engagement in this significant event. Throughout our time together, we have delved into the crucial theme of harnessing finance for sustainable investments, recognizing the vital role it plays in our nation's development trajectory. We find ourselves at a pivotal moment in history where climate change and environmental degradation demand urgent action. The recent global climate reports have underscored the necessity for sustainable development, making it clear that we are running out of time to address these pressing issues effectively. Nepal, like many nations, faces the impacts of climate change, from the rapid melting of Himalayan glaciers to the increasing frequency of natural disasters. Our natural resources are not only national treasures, but also crucial for our economy and society. As we move forward, it is imperative that we prioritize sustainable investments to protect and enhance our natural capital. The Nepal Investment Summit 2024 has provided us with a platform for dialogue, collaboration, and action. It has been an opportunity for us to exchange ideas and explore innovative financing mechanisms to drive sustainable development across various sectors of our economy. In Nepal, most of the things are green. About 45% of our land is forest, that's green. 29% of our land is under cultivation and they produce green agriculture. Out of the rest, we have rivers and snow-capped mountains, which are the source of greenery and green energy. Our development framework and various legal provisions also are green, as they set various criteria for green development. Sometimes there are delays in project initiation due to these provisions. National Planning Commission of Nepal has finalized the 16th development plan, which is coming into implementation starting from coming July. Major interventions proposed in the 16th plan means investment opportunities for the private sector. We are designing various interventions to make sure we can achieve economic growth, annual average economic growth of 7.1% during the plan period. We have estimated that about 9.2 trillion Nepalese rupees will be required for the implementation of various major programs during the 16th plan. Several projects have been showcased and various investment opportunities available in Nepal have been discussed in this investment summit. I would like to highlight the investment opportunities available in other green sectors. The first is agriculture sector, including livestock. We are looking for the investment to establish large-scale agriculture and livestock farms. We are importing agricultural products in a huge amount. Therefore, there is an ample market within the country for agriculture produces and also can be exported specifically to the Gulf countries. Another area for investment is high-value herbal farms producing various medicinal plants, including cordyceps. We call it Versagumba in Nepali. We are also looking for investment and innovative models in use of forest and developing new forests. We have plenty of forest, but we are importing timber and furniture products in a huge amount. Water resources is being used in hydroelectricity production, and there are a few projects proposed in this area in this summit as well. Drinking water is another area of investment. Water export will start soon to Moon and Venus. So we can open the investment in conservation and harvesting of glacier water that can be exported to other planets. So far, underwater glass tunnels are in use to observe the activities of sea creatures in some countries. Let's think about construction of glass tunnels overland going up to base camp of Mount Everest and other mountains. This will ensure the conservation of the environment and make possible for common people to reach the base camp and have a closer view of mountains. We need innovation in green finance. Innovation is happening, but we need more. The 16th plan has embraced various initiatives to promote the green economy. It encourages banks and financial institutions to invest in green projects and adopts the concept of green finance taxonomy and green bond practices. Concessions are provided for investments that improve energy efficiency in domestic and business uses, reduce carbon emissions, and enhance climate adaptability. The plan includes measures to offset environmental protection and adaptation expenses through tax adjustments and environmental fees based on carbon emissions. To achieve our sustainable development goals, we must leverage the power of green finance to mobilize resources for projects promoting renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, waste management, and climate-resilient infrastructure. By investing in these sectors, we not only protect our environment, but also create new opportunities for economic growth, job creation, and poverty alleviation. Today, we stand on the brink of a new era, an era that demands bold and decisive action. Together, let's seize this moment to harness the power of green finance for sustainable investment, ensuring a prosperous and resilient future for generations to come. Our collective commitment to sustainable development will not only benefit our country, but will also contribute to global efforts to combat climate change and preserve our planet for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our chair for this wonderful session, Honorable Dr. Min Bahadur Shrestha, Vice Chair, National Planning Commission. And may I now please request our session chair to present this token of appreciation to our presenter and to our panelists as well. Can we please have the token of appreciations in the center stage, and may I please request our presenter and our moderator, Ms. Radhika Lal, to kindly accept this token of appreciation for being a part of the second parallel session, Green Finance for Sustainable Investment, here at Nepal Investment Summit 2024. We'd also like to thank and request Mr. Madhukumar Varasini, Secretary, Ministry of Finance, to kindly step forward, sir, and accept this token of appreciation from our side. Thank you very much for sharing your valuable insights on what work has currently being done in Nepal in terms of green financing. May I also please request Ms. Idoro Onomakpomo, Infrastructure Industry Manager, Asia Pacific for the International Finance Corporation, to kindly accept this token of appreciation from Nepal Investment Summit 2024. Would like to also request Mr. Rodrigo Porto, Senior Financial Sector Consultant, World Bank Group, to kindly accept our token of appreciation for being a part of the panel. Would like to request you to accept this from our session chair. Would also like to request Mr. Jason Wing, Sustainability Partnerships Lead at Standard Chartered Bank Singapore, to kindly accept this token of appreciation. And would also like to request Mr. Ashish Garg, Chair of the Energy Council at CNI, to kindly accept this token of appreciation. And thank you very much, sir, for being a part of this Green Finance for Sustainable Investment session. May I now please kindly request the CEO of Investment Board of Nepal, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, to kindly join us onto the stage to present a token of appreciation to our session chair. And thank you very much to Honorable Dr. Min Bahadur Shrestha, Vice Chair of the National Planning Commission, for graciously accepting our invitation and for being a wonderful session chair in this session. Would like to request Sushil sir to kindly stay back for a group photograph. Would like to take a group photo with all our panelists and our session chair as well. All right. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this session. We'd like to take a group photograph to mark the ending of this session on harnessing green finance for sustainable investment. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a wonderful audience as well. We'd like to announce that we now have our lunch break. So the lunch break will be out in the garden where it was yesterday. We'd like to request all of you to kindly join us back inside the hall. In this particular hall, we have the next session on ICT, a vibrant investment platform, where you'll get to understand the ICT scenario in Nepal. So if you're interested, please rejoin us after the lunch break here at this hall. Thank you very much. And please leave your headsets behind. We'd like to remind you to kindly leave your headsets behind before you head out for lunch.
A panel member for this session will be joining us or connecting to us via a video message. He could not be here in person, but we're grateful that he will be connecting to us and giving his inputs via a video message. He is Dr. Frank Risberma, the Director General of Global Green Growth Institute, which is a treaty-based intergovernmental organization which supports developing countries and emerging economies in promoting climate-resilient, socially just and environmentally sustainable economic growth. Priorly, he was the Chief Executive Officer of Consultative Group for International Agriculture Research Consortium, and he has worked as the first Director of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Said that, we extend a warm welcome to Dr. Rizburma as well. My privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to be inviting up on stage our esteemed session moderator, Ms. Anu Joshi Shrestha, who is the Enterprise and Value Chain Development Specialist at EC Mode since the year 2009 and country focal for Nepal. She has extensive experience working in Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, India, Pakistan, and Nepal, and she's an executive board member of the Management Association of Nepal and invited member of Startup and Innovation Forum FNCCI. She holds the MBA from the University of Wales, the United Kingdom. My pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, now to invite our distinguished panelists, namely Dr. Deepak Kumar Kharal, who is the Secretary of the Ministry of Forest and Environment in Nepal. He has previously worked with the RED Implementation Center and the National Trust for Nature Conservation. He is known for his expertise in the field of forest and environment. Mr. Takeo Koike, if you are here present with us. All right, so pleased to have you here. So inviting Mr. Takeo Koike, who's the Regional Head, Private Sector Development, South Asia Department, the Asian Development Bank. He holds more than 25 years of experience in infrastructure, finance, and public-private partnership across Central and South Asia. He has executed complex and limited resource project financing in power generation projects in India, Pakistan, and Georgia, and raised corporate financing for power companies in India, Kazakhstan, and Armenia. He holds an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania and MSc in economics from the London School of Economics. Next, our esteemed panelist, Mr. Manohar Das Mool, Executive Member, Nepal Chamber of Commerce, and who's also the Chairman of Saleco, the Sagarmatha Lumbini Insurance Company Limited. Mr. Mool serves as an Executive Member of the Nepal Chamber of Commerce and is an expert in banking, finance, and insurance sector. He's the promoter of various insurance, bank, and hydro companies in Nepal. Indeed, pleased and privileged to welcome up on stage Ms. Navita Srikanth, international development expert who holds 27 years of global experience in IFIs like the World Bank and ADB. Ms. Srikanth specializes in governance, fiduciary risk, economic crime, and oversight tools. She has led financial crime investigations, including multi-million-dollar fraud cases, and served as a court commissioner and forensic expert. Last but not the least, our esteemed panelist, Mr. Bishal Thapa, who is founder and chairman of Saral Urja Nepal, a senior director at CLASP, an international non-profit promoting energy efficiency and clean energy. With 25 years of experience, he has worked with various government, non-governmental, and private sector partners in the national and international energy sector. Mr. Thapa holds a master's in economics from the University of Maryland, College Park, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, we are very, very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce you to this pool of distinguished panel members and who have been at the forefront of shaping Nepal's green economy. Many among the panelists leveraging initiatives, technologies, and even policy frameworks and entrepreneurial spirit to create solutions here in Nepal and elsewhere. Said that, first and foremost, my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, now to invite, first of all, we would want to begin the session with the video message that I talked about earlier from one of our special members in the panel, Dr. Frank Rizburma, Director General, Global Green Growth Institute, Korea. So may I turn to my technical team, if we can have the video on our screens, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Frank Rizburma, the Director General of GGI, and it's my pleasure to say a few words at your meeting. GGI is an intergovernmental organization established in 2012 to support its member states to transition to an economic development model that is more environmentally sustainable and more socially inclusive. That is what we define as green growth. GDGI now has 48 member states and another 20 plus countries in the process of ratifying our establishment treaty. So we work with over 70 countries, including Nepal. Our model is that our staff are embedded in member country governments, mostly the ministries of environment, planning, and finance. We support our member governments to develop more green policies and then to help mobilize green and climate finance for green investment projects. And towards the end of 2023, we have helped mobilize over $10 billion in such green and climate finance. At the end of 2024, we expect to have a headcount of some 1,000 staff and consultants, about 100 in our headquarters in Seoul, and the remaining 900 in 50 plus countries. So while GDGI works directly for our member governments, we often work with the private sector, particularly to develop and finance investment projects in the green areas that range from renewable energy, electric transportation, climate smart agriculture, to reforestation and green buildings. GDGI has been working in Nepal since 2017, and Nepal is a member of GDGI since 2022, since last year, well, 2 years ago now. We are embedded within the Ministry of Forest and Environment, and the GDGI country office is in the Department of Soils and Forests. We also have a project office in Janakpur. The key focus of GDGI Nepal is to identify and develop investment opportunities that will help put Nepal on a green, sustainable pathway and will strengthen private sector involvement in the green transition. I'd like to take the opportunity to share just 3 examples to highlight our work with the private and also the public sector. First, GDGI is partnering with GIZ from Germany on a 5-year project to introduce 3,500 electric micro and mini buses from being fossil fuel based to being renewable energy based. Public transportation in Nepal is largely in the hand of private companies, and we will therefore facilitate transport companies, private transport companies, to have access to loans on attractive terms from private banks in Nepal. We'll also work closely with the government of Nepal on technical and policy issues, such as technical standards for buses and charging stations, that will nurture a proper ecosystem for the expansion of the agriculture sector. According to the government of Nepal, hydrogen will be a potential national priority. It's a greenhouse gas mitigation technology and a strategic opportunity for long-term sustainable management, focused on the brick sector. Brick production in Nepal is one of the main economic activities, contributing to about 10% of the country's GDP and employing 300,000 workers, so the Korean Exim Bank and with sector experts. So while we have other projects in Nepal, particularly a large program to support climate smart agriculture,
impacts innovation efforts to opportunities. However, to give a definite course to the deliberations, the experts-led deliberations that begins shortly here at the forum, may I now invite for a presentation Dr. Surendra.
Participants, it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be here with all of you. And I would like to thank the Investment Summit team for organizing this session. For investment in Nepal as well as in the region, what are the opportunities we have for investments and which products are the low-hanging fruits where we see the comparative advantages for countries like Nepal. So ICIMOD, as many of you know, is the International Center for Integrated Mountain Developments. It is a regional mountain knowledge, learning and enabling center working on sustainable mountain development, focusing on mountain and the people. It is owned and supported by 8 countries, Afghanistan in the west to Myanmar in the east. So ICIMOD is organized into 3 strategic groups. The first one is about reducing risk of climate and the environment, which also includes reducing the air pollution risk. The second strategic group is about promoting mountain resilient economies and the landscapes. And third one is how we can enhance the regional cooperation, bring these 8 countries together and go with a common voice, the collective voice to all these global and regional platforms so that we are heard better. And the Hindu-Kush Himalaya region, as you know, it is a global asset for food, energy, water, carbon, cultural and biological diversity. It extends from Afghanistan to Myanmar, 35,000 kilometers in length and 4 million square kilometers. And it is the water tower. 10 of the major river systems in Asia, they are fed by the glaciers. So the largest mass of the ice, besides the north and the southern pole, is in this region. That's why we call it the third pole. However, this region is melting 2 times faster than the rest of the world. So this has a huge implications in hydropower, in agriculture, in life and the livelihoods. So that's why we need investment to reduce the risk, which we call triple planetary crisis, climate change, air pollution, which is an emerging threat, and the biodiversity loss, and the build resilience. That's why we need green and resilient economic focus. When you see yesterday, we heard from eminent speakers about the need of road, need of infrastructure, need of hydropower and all those things. So what we need to consider when we talk about the infrastructure is the fragility, the vulnerability of the mountain lands, the hilly and unstable slopes, and the unpredictable rains, too much, too little rains, and the prolonged droughts, they are causing number of landslides and the death. If you see in 2022 figure, we had 327 landslides, 99 deaths affecting 992 families with economic effect of 88 million Nepali rupees, which is a big thing. So when we talk about infrastructure, we need to think of resilient infrastructure. The second point, when we talk about investment, we need investment to have a clean air. We could see, we had to divert the flights. We had to close the schools and the colleges. So what we need is investment for air pollution solutions. We could see the examples from Beijing in China. At one point of time, it was very hard to see the sky. So now they have managed to reduce the air pollution significantly. So we need investment to promote air pollution solutions because air pollution is a big challenge, not only for Nepal, but the globe. If we see the WHO figure, 7 million deaths worldwide every year due to air pollution. The third area where we need investment is restoring biodiversity and reviving life. This is again a global challenge. Over the last century, we have lost 70% of our biodiversity. And if we consider countries like Bhutan and Nepal or the Himalayan regions across the Hindu-Kush Himalaya, the 85% population, they depend on highland ecosystem or the ecosystem services. And the quality of these ecosystem services is degrading. As you could relate the figure from Sikkim, the huge population of yak died over a week 2 years ago because of the extreme climates and the weather. So Nepal has identified some priority sectors that need urgent investment. And we also contributed in identification of those sectors as a priority sectors for Nepal with the Ministry of Forest and Environment, with this nationally determined contribution, which says that, if we want to have adaptation, and the adaptation need is equal to $45,940 million if we want to meet our NDC targets. And if we see in Nepal's aid atlas, of this need, 45,940, so far the commitment is for $2,289 million. And the disbursed is $197 million. This does not include some of the figures from the World Bank, ADB, and other multinational development bank. This is a tentative figure, which we collected from Aid Atlas, our partner climate analytics. And this shows that, there is a huge gap between our need, for adaptation and the fund that is flowing in Nepal. I think Mr. Secretary will elaborate on this. And agriculture is the Nepal's priority sector when we talk about the adaptations. But this is the sector which is globally underfunded. If you see the 2022 figure, the total climate finance was $660 billion. And of the total $660 billion, only $28.5 billion went to agri-food system, which is our most priority sector. And of these $28.5 billion, the small-scale farmer, because in the countries like Nepal, the farm holding is less than 5 hectares, all smallholders, and they received only 1% of the total climate finance. But if you see the impact of climate change in agriculture, as per FAO, it is 25% of total impact of climate change absorbed by agriculture sector. But they receive very tiny funds from the climate finance. Similarly, when we say the forest biodiversity and the water management is our second most priority, as highlighted in NDCs, and there also, it is a huge untapped potential. Nepal is rich in natural resources, as we heard yesterday from many eminent speakers, but this potential is still untapped. If we see in China, they are making a huge business with this traditional Chinese medicine, harnessing the potential of nature. But here, if we see our export of these medicinal plants or the Ayurvedic medicine, it is very, very less. And another challenge with regards to the nature is undervaluations. We are not giving the due recognition of the ecosystem services that we get from the nature. I give you one figure which says that the value of crop pollination, carbon sequestration and water purification is estimated as $125 to $140 trillion, which is much higher than the global GDP. If the services we get from the ecosystem, from the nature is much higher than the global GDP, then what we need is we need investments in these particular sectors. So this is the study conducted in Nepal by Matthew et al. In 2022, 2 years ago, and they are saying that on an average, we are losing $250 per capita due to insufficient pollination of our agricultural crops. But if we see on the other side the potential, there is a huge potential to invest in bees, in honey, and many other value-added products. I did one study in which I could see that, from one single plant, which is called butter tree, cherry plants, we can have 18,000 metric tons of honey in a year. But we don't have a huge investor focusing on beekeeping of the honey, of the NTFPs and the medicinal plants. So this is what I wanted to highlight. And then we have many niche products and nature-based solutions which can be low-hanging fruits for the investors. For example, in agroecology, we have not gone so far with the chemicals, with the chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So there is a huge scope to promote organic agriculture, to produce safe and hygienic food in Nepal, to certify them as organic. What we need is investments. And the Nepal Investment Board, they have come up with a good list of the products which have a comparative advantages, like large cardamom. If you see the large cardamom that we have in Nepal, this is available only in 3 countries of the globe, Bhutan, Nepal, and India. So it is a unique product. But we are not able to position this cardamom as a unique product in the global market because we don't have enough investments in these sectors. Similarly, in all these products which are identified by the Nepal Investment Board. The forest resources, Nepal is known as the best example of community forests. We know, Eleanor Ostrom, who received Nobel Prize as the first woman in 2009. She mentioned the case of Nepal, how important it is to engage communities who use natural resources in the management, giving the community forest users group as an example. But at the moment, we are not able to harness the potential of community forest users group and the community forest in terms of bioprospecting, in terms of getting businesses out of the non-wood forest products that we have in the forest.